Growing up, I had a list of 9 Christmas movies that I would watch each and every year. Last year, I revisited the 1970 Christmas classic Santa Claus is Coming to Town, where we learned that Santa is a massive creeper who gives children presents in exchange for kisses.
A kiss, a toy, is the price you'll pay.
This year, I decided to knock another one off the list as I rewatched another Rankin Bass movie, 1974's The Year Without a Santa Claus. I was curious to see if The Year Without a Santa Claus was as I remembered it, or if it was as nuts as Santa Claus is Coming to Town turned out to be. The movie opens with Mrs. Claus recounting the fateful year where Santa took a vacation. She tells us that it happened long ago, but doesn't quite remember the year. She describes the year as terrible.
Did you ever hear of that terrible year?
And makes the audience believe that Christmas was cancelled, and everyone had a really bad time.
Bro, I'm straight up not having a good time.
Mrs. Claus's narration leads us back to the year itself, as we see a sad sack Santa recounting all of his aches and pains. And most telling of all is the moment when Santa says,
And a sort of kind of kink inside whenever I think of that Christmas ride.
Telling the audience that what it really boils down to is that Santa is depressed. With belief in him dwindling, he doesn't really feel appreciated for all of his hard work. He is visited by a grouchy doctor who tells him about how no one cares about Christmas anymore and that Santa is just wasting his time.
Nobody cares a hoot and holler for you or Christmas.
Giving credence to Santa's negative thoughts. The doctor also decides that the thermometer that Mrs. Claus was using is no good, and he takes it out, only to take Santa's temperature with his own thermometer. How did this guy even get a job at the North Pole while being such a Scrooge? After his convo with the doctor, Santa is even more depressed and decides to cancel Christmas. Mrs. Claus says that he told every elf and gnome.
He called to his elves and he told each gnome.
Which instantly grabbed me, because since when does Santa have gnomes working for him? I felt blindsided by this, always picturing only elves being in Santa's workshop. It turns out there are many, particularly in the Scandinavian countries, who believe that Santa has Christmas gnomes in his employ. As I dug deeper, it started to seem like there was a massive conspiracy going on, as Santa's use of gnomes was hidden as Big Elf pushed the idea of Christmas elves, resulting in a gnome erasure. Christmas gnomes became the victim of a serious smear campaign, as the film Elf, a movie driven by its biased elf propaganda, depicted gnomes as bad employees that showed up to work intoxicated.
It's a job only an elf can do. The gnomes drank too much.
There have been other hit pieces to come out, depicting gnomes as lazy, feeding into the idea of elf supremacy. The 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons even speculated that Santa's primary workforce is mostly comprised of gnomes, their hard work being incorrectly credited to elves. Though this revelation was troubling and rocked me to my core, I had to persevere and continue watching an almost 50-year-old movie, something no one asked me or likely even wanted me to do. With the news spreading that Santa wasn't going to make his annual journey across the globe, it was front page in almost every paper. Once again, I found myself distracted, with my eyes instead being drawn to Panic in New York, Menagerie Breaks Loose. After a quick Google search, it turns out that this was an actual real-life headline, and perhaps more interesting, a famous hoax. In November of 1874, an article was published in the New York Herald, talking about a mass animal escape from the Central Park Zoo that resulted in 249 people being mauled. At the very end of the article, the author wrote the equivalent of "It's just a prank, bro," stating that he made up the whole thing. But that admission was not enough to calm the mass panic incited by the article. Does this matter for the movie? No. But it tells us that The Year Without a Santa Claus takes place during the Christmas of 1874, so that's neat. Back to Santa, Mrs. Claus is not about to take the canceling of Christmas lying down, as she starts her scheming. Her first plan is to commit identity theft and pose as Santa. When it's clear that she won't be able to pull it off, she enlists the help of 2 elves, Jingle and Jangle. Feel free to think of these guys as Dumb and Dumber, as they really don't have a lot going on upstairs. Jingle does have a cool Flava Flav clock that he wears though. Mrs. Claus sends the 2 dumb elves into the world to try and find some Christmas cheer, to prove to Santa that people do still care about Christmas. She sends them off with the help of the reindeer Vixen. When Mrs. Claus returns to Santa's room, the big man immediately knows something is up. I mean, I suppose it's pretty easy to tell when Mrs. Claus goes all Shakespeare on him.
Poor Jingle. Poor Jangle.
When she comes clean to Santa about sending the dumb stupid elves south, Santa springs out of bed to chase after them. Jingle and Jangle end up in Southtown, USA, where they are immediately pulled over by a police officer and given a ticket for dressing funny on a Sunday. As a result, they decide to disguise Vixen as a dog, before going to talk to some kids, as they always were Santa's favorites. They go to a nearby school. Here they meet Ignatius Thistlewhite, or Iggy for short, who tells them that the kids don't care about Santa, as believing in him is for babies. He tells the elves that the dog catcher has their pooch, causing the pair to run after Vixen. I guess the dog catcher isn't very good at his job, since he can't tell the difference between a dog and a baby reindeer with socks on its ears. As Iggy leaves school and walks home, an old man who was seemingly waiting for the young boy to walk by pops out of the bushes. Not creepy at all. This old man is Santa, but he doesn't want to just come out and say that, so he has to think fast to come up with a fake name.
Klaus.
I couldn't think of another word.
Iggy invites the strange Mr. Klaus into his house, where Iggy talks about Jingle and Jangle asking the school kids about Santa Claus. There's a funny moment where after Iggy says he doesn't believe in Santa, we get to hear Santa's inner monologue, and he comes off as a paranoid weirdo.
Just as I thought.
When Iggy asks if Santa believes in himself, we get a new song. There are a few moments that are kind of funny, like how Santa openly says that part of the reason he is canceling Christmas is because he wants to be missed.
I know he's there, waiting to be missed.
We also get a flashback to when Iggy's dad was a kid and had stopped believing in Santa, which caused Santa to creep into the young boy's room and stare him down. Also, while Santa and Iggy's dad are singing, Iggy's mom is just kind of staring off into the distance. After Iggy is convinced to start believing in Santa again, he tells Santa that Vixen was taken to the pound. This spurs Santa into action, as he goes to the pound, rescues Vixen, and heads home before Vixen's illness gets any worse. Jingle and Jangle, who still think Vixen is at the pound, go to the mayor to try and get her freed. They run into Iggy there, who had a similar idea. The mayor makes them a deal that if they can get it to snow in Southtown, something that hasn't happened in 100 years, he will free Vixen and declare a national holiday for Santa. He's thinking about calling it Christmas.
It's a deal.
Unsure about what to do next, the trio decide to call Mrs. Claus for help, which Mrs. Claus gasses herself up about in the narration.
But Jingle got a brilliant idea.
She picks them up to go and try and strike a deal with the Miser Brothers to allow snow in Southtown. The Miser Brothers are easily the most memorable thing about this movie, at least for me. They have the best songs in the entire film, and they have been stuck in my head since I first saw this as a child. And it's not just me. Mr. Freeze is a notable fan of Snow Miser's work.
I'm Mr. Icicle. I'm Mr. Tenderloin.
They are essentially elemental gods, with Snow Miser possessing a mastery of snow and ice and controlling the northern hemisphere, and Heat Miser having fire powers and is in control of the southern hemisphere. They are polar opposites, with Snow Miser having a cool personality and loving Santa and Christmas for all the free publicity.
Why, he's the best advertisement Snowbiz ever had.
And Heat Miser hating Santa as it feels like he plays favorites. Because Southtown is in Heat Miser's territory, a compromise must be made with him in order for Snow Miser to make it snow there. Heat Miser asks for a hot sunny day in the North Pole for cooperating, something Snow Miser is unwilling to do. Mrs. Claus is done messing around and decides to go to the person at the very tippy top. Mother Nature. Mother Nature is all too happy to help out Mrs. Claus and rein in her sons. It's a little weird though, as she tells Snow Miser to allow snow in Southtown, which makes Snow Miser look upset and Heat Miser happy, which should be the opposite reactions.
Now you let a little snow fall in Southland, and you allow just one nice spring day at the North Pole.
Whoa. Think you got it backwards there, buddy.
With that settled, Mrs. Claus drops Iggy back off in Southtown, where it's snowing. The mayor is shocked to find out that Jingle and Jangle were telling the truth, and since Vixen is already gone, he helps give Santa an official holiday. Mrs. Claus then tells us that the children of the world decided to bring Christmas to Santa, and so they sent him a bunch of gifts. She mentions that the kids had more fun that December than any other that they could remember, essentially contradicting everything she said in the beginning of the movie. As Santa sees that the children still care, suddenly all of his ailments are cured, and he announces that Christmas is back on the menu. He admits that the reason he canceled it in the first place was because of his depression.
I dreamed unhappy things.
But now that his hard work has been acknowledged, he wants to give back to the world. The movie ends with Santa delivering presents as he flies down Santa Claus Lane. So in the end, Mrs. Claus lied again, as there never actually was a year without a Santa Claus. With all that said, I want to wish everybody a happy holidays. Thank you for watching. I know this is a little different from a lot of my videos, but I thought it would be fun to do a more jokey seasonal video. In the future, you can expect more long-form analysis videos with the occasional more jokey video thrown in. If you enjoyed the video, I would really appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed. It really helps out the channel. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.